In the 1960s, just one income could often afford to buy a family a house, groceries, utilities, a car, kids, and still have money left over to save. But in 2026, many households on two incomes are struggling to just keep up. And the question is, why? Well, instead of blaming the usual suspects of greedy corporations, inflation, stagnant wages, and avocado toast, I want to take a much more critical look at this topic and see the evolution of one simple question. Where does the household get what it needs to survive? Because while the cost of living has changed, how the household operates has perhaps changed even more. And so let's begin by talking about how the household operated for most of history. Chapter 1, the no-income household. Now, for most of history, households didn't operate solely on how much money they were bringing in, but they operated primarily on what they could produce themselves. And so when I ask the question, where does the household get what it needs to survive? There are really two places it can get it from: the household itself and the market. And nowadays, households overwhelmingly rely to get what they need from the market. But for most of history, households got what they needed from the household itself. Families grew crops and raised livestock that would one day become their food. They preserved food for the winter. They made and repaired clothing, fetched water, cut firewood, took care of children, and so much more. And so families didn't need that much money to survive. They only needed money for things they couldn't produce themselves, and that is when they turned to the market. While a family could produce their own food and take care of their own children, they couldn't produce things like salt or make iron tools, and so they would buy those things from the market. And so what I'm getting at is that nowadays, households rely heavily on the market to get what they need to survive. But for most of history, the household heavily relied on the household itself to get what it needs, and the market was simply a supplement. Which explains why households didn't need a big income in order to survive. But over time, the market became incredibly efficient at producing goods, much more efficient than households. And that's when our story begins to change. Chapter 2, the one-income household. Now, surviving without relying on an income might sound nice. However, in reality, it was a tough life. Producing everything yourself meant constant physical labor, long hours, and fewer material comforts. The household could produce things for itself, but it wasn't really that efficient at doing it. But by the 1800s, due to industrialization, the market became a lot more efficient at producing things than households. While it might take a family days to spin and weave its own fabric, a textile mill could produce enormous quantities of fabric at the same amount of time. And on top of producing things more efficiently, this efficient market also offered people employment to earn a wage, and with those wages, they could afford to buy more goods from the market. And this is where income starts to play a much bigger role in how households provide for themselves. Instead of both partners spending their days directly producing, a new arrangement emerged. One adult, usually the husband, focused on providing an income to buy things from the market, while the other adult, usually the wife, focused on providing the domestic labor that kept the household running, which would later be known as the one-income household. And probably the biggest misconception about this one-income household is that people commonly think that one income means one provider. Because nowadays we have this concept that the market provides. But in reality, this one-income model worked because two people were providing in very different ways that complemented each other. While a paycheck bought the groceries, the household labor turned those groceries into meals. And while the paycheck might pay for the house, the household labor turned that house into a functioning home. And this is the household structure behind that one-income lifestyle that we all seem to envy nowadays. But the reality is, what made it possible were two people specializing in two different things. And so when we return to that question, where does the household get what it needs to survive? With the one-income model, more was coming from the market, but still a lot was coming from the household. The household was being very efficient with its money. It wasn't just about how much money was coming in, but it was about how efficiently that money was being used. And we could learn a thing or two from that model nowadays. Like, did you know if you have a flexible spending account, or FSA, you can use your pre-tax money not just on doctor's appointments and prescriptions, but on everyday healthcare items like sunscreen and Tylenol, allowing you to save money on the things that you're already buying. An FSA store makes it easier for you to take advantage of those savings. FSA Store, the sponsor of today's video, is the largest online marketplace dedicated entirely to FSA eligible products with over 2,500 items. Everything is FSA eligible, so there's no guesswork on what's covered. They have everything from Burt's Bees lip balm, to contacts, to tampons, to Benadryl, to a smart wearable health tracker watch. All of these qualify as eligible medical expenses, and the savings are a bigger deal than most people realize. Because instead of paying taxes first and then buying these products, you're avoiding income and FICA taxes on that money, which depending on your tax bracket can save you 20 or 30%. So if these are things you're going to buy anyways, it's one of the easiest ways to lower your everyday expenses and get some major savings. And I was very surprised on what products are eligible. They have a wide variety of categories that qualify that really surprised me. You can get pain relief and recovery products, like this arch foot massager hub and this hot stone therapy system. And you can also get high-tech health products like this full body circulation plate and a smart baby breathing monitoring system. All the way to skincare brands like Supergoop, Mighty Patch and Coola, and even sunscreens and over-the-counter medication like allergy meds and antacids. And so if you have a flexible spending account, give FSA Store a look by scanning this QR code or going to fsastore.com/AustinW. Using that link or scanning that QR code not only supports this channel, but it also allows you to get the most out of your pre-tax dollars. And thank you FSA Store for sponsoring this video. Chapter 3, the two-income household. Now, this one-income, two-provider household model became very efficient throughout the post-World War II period that built a very strong middle class. However, as we moved forward in time, by the late 60s and 70s, we started to see that second adult begin to enter the workforce to earn a wage for the family. And there were a variety of reasons for this. Throughout the 60s and 70s, there was the second wave of the feminist movement where women were challenging gender norms. Even though stay-at-home spouses contributed a lot to the middle-class family, many women wanted to pursue professional lives of their own. And so more women started to get an education and earn incomes of their own. And in addition, many women also wanted their own financial independence, and so throughout this time, we saw the government pass legislation that allowed women equal opportunities to professional and financial services. Also around this time, the contraceptive came out that gave women more control over the timing of their marriage and childbearing, which made longer-term education and career planning more feasible. But it wasn't just women wanting to enter the workforce that shifted the nation into two-income households. But throughout the 70s, economic pressure was making that second paycheck increasingly necessary. Inflation throughout the 70s eroded purchasing power of a single paycheck, while wages struggled to keep up pace with the rising cost of living. And so throughout the 70s, a second income was becoming more necessary to maintain a middle-class lifestyle. And so if we look back at that model, something was changing. Instead of one person earning an income and the other managing the household, now both adults were earning incomes. And in theory, it seems like this strategy should make the household more prosperous, but there was a problem. While the household gained a second income, it lost the labor inside the home. And that work still needed to be done, and so the household began to search for other places to get it from. Chapter 4, Market Support. Now, going back to that one-income model, although the domestic worker wasn't producing an income, they were still providing services the household needed every single day. But the confusing part about these services is that although they don't generate an income, they still generate economic value. They might not be making the household any money, but they sure are saving the household a lot of money. But when both parties entered the market and began to earn an income, there was a problem. These domestic services still needed to be done, but there was no longer somebody primarily designated to accomplish them. And that is when the family was forced to make a choice. Continue doing this work in-house in their free time, or turn to the market to purchase these services. And both came with their pros and cons. Doing them in your off hours meant it saved the household money, but it then cost them time, while pushing them onto the market saved the household time, but cost them money. And in practice, many households started to do a combination of them both. They might clean their own house on the weekend to save money, but pay for takeout a couple nights a week to save time, increasing their spending. However, not all domestic duties come with this option. Some services must be outsourced if the family wants to take on that second income. And the biggest example is childcare. A 3-year-old still needs supervision during the exact hours parents are working. And so the family now has outsourced childcare to the market at a hefty price tag of $15,000 a year. It becomes a cost directly associated with that second income, and these costs can add up so much that the actual value of that second income can be very deceiving. And so let's visualize this. Imagine a one-income household earning $70,000 a year with a domestic worker. Now imagine a two-income household where one spouse makes $70,000 and the second spouse makes $50,000. On paper, that household now has an income of $120,000 a year, which is $50,000 more than the one-income household. However, supporting that second income comes with expenses that one-income household doesn't encounter. They have to spend $15,000 a year on childcare, $4,000 a year extra on commuting, gas, and other vehicle costs, $3,000 extra a year on eating out because they're more tired, $1,500 on work clothes and other job-related expenses, and $1,500 on occasional cleaning services, totaling $25,000 a year in new expenses. Meaning that half of that $50,000 second income is being consumed with costs directly associated with earning it. And it's actually contributing about $25,000 more to the household, or a total income of $95,000 a year. However, the problem with that example I just gave you is that I was far too generous with the numbers, because before that person gets their income, somebody else needs to get their cut first. Chapter 5. Uncle Sam enters the household. Now, let's go back to that one-income household. The beauty of household producing these economically valuable services for itself is that although the work doesn't generate an income, it also doesn't generate taxable income. But once that same person moves their labor onto the market and starts earning a wage, their labor now becomes taxable income, and Uncle Sam can come in and do what he does best: take his fair share. And so let's go back to that two-income household. That $50,000 second income was their gross income. But gross income is not the same as spendable income. It first needs to get taxed. And so let's adjust that $50,000 number into net or spendable income. And just a forewarning, these are going to be very rough numbers, and I'm only going to focus on taxing that extra $50,000. Firstly, that $50,000 will go through federal income tax of $4,175. Then Social Security tax at $3,100. Then $725 for Medicare. And let's say they live in the state of Georgia and pay $2,000 in state tax. A total of $10,000 in taxes. So their net income is actually $40,000. And then we can subtract that $25,000 in expenses. And so in reality, that $50,000 has only provided an additional $15,000 to the household budget. Now, that second income is still making the household better off financially, and depending on their financial situation, it could be completely necessary in order to pay the bills. But although that $15,000 is real, it doesn't capture the non-financial cost associated with generating it. That second worker is now away from home 2,000 hours a year working, and might be spending 225 hours a year commuting on top of the primary earner, which means that the household is now time poor. And not only are they struggling to find the time to do all these domestic duties and spending more money because of it, but they also have less time for their children, their relationship, their health, their community, and simply enjoying the life those two incomes are supposed to provide. The household became slightly richer in money, but much poorer in time. And so when we look at this story as a whole, it's much easier to see what happened. Chapter 6. The market-dependent household. In the beginning of this video, I told you we're going to see the evolution of one simple question. Where does the household get what it needs to survive? And at the start of this video, the household got the majority of what it needed from the household. But over time, more and more of what the household needed shifted onto the market. Until we reach the point today where the household doesn't really produce that much at all anymore. The scale has essentially flipped. And the majority of what the household needs now come from the market, and almost nothing comes from the home. While two incomes might bring in more money, they've also made the household a lot more dependent on the market, and have created a lot more expenses that didn't exist when the household had a domestic worker. Just to put this in perspective, according to one study, it estimated that a stay-at-home parent with 2 children performs roughly $4,500 worth of unpaid labor every month, which is $54,000 a year. Now, that doesn't mean that every stay-at-home parent literally saves the family $54,000 a year, but it does show that household workers do provide a lot of economic value. And not only that, but they can also ease the pressure, giving the family time back. However, I don't think the lesson of this video is that we should all go back to this old model. There is a reason that society shifted away from this one-income household model. Women gained opportunities and financial independence they didn't have before. The market gave us access to more goods and services that previous generations couldn't have imagined. And those services created a drastically higher standard of living. But that progress came with a price. You just can't have all good or just all bad, but you're gonna get a little bit of both. And so I think the question we should be asking ourselves is, when you add up everything we gained and everything we lost, did we actually come out ahead? Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, subscribe. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comment section. And if you want to hear another very interesting story about the real reason nobody's having kids anymore, give this video a watch next. And with that, muchas gracias. Que tengan un buen día. Nos vemos, chicos.